My name is Sam Magul. I'm with WeAreChange Ohio, and WeAreChange Ohio. Nothing to do with Obama, by the way. And back when you came through Northern Kentucky,
Sir.
Can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Okay. I'm with WeAreChange Ohio.
Sir.
Are you as paranoid as the college Republicans? Do you mind if I film you? I have this on the record.
Well, it'll be on the record.
Okay. Thank you.
It's against our politics, sir.
I'll make this brief. Okay. Yes. Okay. We asked you about Democratic Congressman Brad Sherman's statements that they were threatened with martial law if they did not pass the bailout. Since then, it's been backed up by James Inhofe. Now, when we asked you about Brad Sherman, you called him crazy. Are you going to say the same thing about Representative James Inhofe?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, it's on YouTube. We have the statements. It's been up there since we asked you guys.
Okay, next, over here.
I just got one question for you about the bailout plan, if you don't mind.
Real quick.
All right, so Bloomberg reports it's really going to cost $5 trillion. We're giving dictatorial power to Henry Paulson, who's now about to give it to Neil Kashkari, his next.
I know him. I trust the guy.
Exactly. Don't you think there's been like a conflict of interest? You know, some guy
Look,
spending.
it's limited to $700 billion.
It's true, but there's no oversight.
There's congressional oversight.
Yeah, but he doesn't have to agree with them,
No,
and he can do whatever he
there's
wants.
also oversight. He can do what he wants to do. He had any securities that he wants to purchase, he has to have the approval of the Federal Reserve.
But he can still act on it, even without their approval.
Not without their approval. It has to be.
Did you know that Congress was actually threatened with martial law? Brad Sherman, Representative Brad Sherman,
He's a nut.
he's a nut. That was a congressman, sir. Our Congress is nuts.
Senator Inhofe of Oklahoma and Congressman Brad Sherman of California, amongst others, told the world that the entire Congress had been threatened with martial law by the White House and the Treasury Department if they didn't pass the so-called banker bailout bill.
The only way they can pass this bill is by creating and sustaining a panic atmosphere. That atmosphere is not justified. Many of us were told in private conversations that if we voted against this bill on Monday, that the sky would fall, the market would drop 2,000 or 3,000 points the first day, another couple thousand the second day, and a few members were even told that there would be martial law in America if we voted no. That's what I call fear-mongering. Unjustified.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you for coming out here, for giving us all the time to ask you some questions. I just had a real quick question. The morning of 9/11, the White House issued a press release that was picked up and reported by the Washington Post. That specific threat was made against the president in Air Force One, in which highly classified codes were used to threaten the president on Air Force One. And it was later confirmed by Condoleezza Rice on Fox News. And my question is, has there been any investigation as to how Al-Qaeda was able to obtain these codes?
Yeah, and I actually was talking about it on 9/11. You know, there's a thing called the fog of war. And on 9/11, there were a lot of things that were thought. For example, I just finished writing about this in chapter 1026. The report was that a car bomb had been parked in front of the State Department. Shortly after that, a warning was conveyed to Air Force One that a specific threat had been made against Air Force One using the secret code word that in existence for Air Force One, Angel. But there had been a call to Secret Service headquarters into the White House switchboard, one of the two, I can't remember which one, that said, Angel will be next. This caused a great deal of consternation. It was later found out that what happened, days later, they interviewed the agents who had taken the call, and come to find out, one of the agents who had taken the call, somebody said Air Force One will be next, and they told another agent there had been a threat on Air Force One, and that agent then conveyed it up the chain of command saying there's been a threat against Angel. And the thought was that that had been made in the original phone call. It turned out not to be true. But I was on the plane in the cabin with the president when the word came through that there was a threat on Angel. Eddie Morenzo, the head of the president's security detail, the president said, I'm going back to Washington, D.C. So at this point, we're motoring around Jacksonville, Florida, trying to figure out where we're going. With the Secret Service and the Pentagon and the National Command Structure saying we cannot guarantee the space over Washington, D.C. We don't want you to return, Mr. President. We want you to go to Barksdale Air Force Base, the headquarters of the 8th Air Force, which ironically enough on 9/11 was in the midst of was at top security status because they were undergoing a nuclear test drill. And Eddie Lorenzo walked in and said, Mr. President, there's been a specific threat made against Air Force One invoking the code word Angel. And I've known the President since I was 22 and he was 26, and he was not too happy about being told he couldn't go to Washington, D.C. By the time we got to Barksdale, he pretty well determined that regardless of what the military or the Secret Service said about the condition of the airspace over Washington, he was going back that day, no ifs, ands, or buts. And when we got to Omaha, Nebraska, before we got off the plane, he turned to Andy Card, the Chief of Staff, and said, I don't care what is said here. When we leave this meeting, we're going to Washington, D.C. And this incident is in Chapter 12. We're very excited. Yeah.
Centerpiece of 9/11, I think the single most important piece of evidence in the entire day, the incoming threat given to the Secret Service, Angel is next, meaning we will destroy Air Force One. And it doesn't just come with Angel is next, it then comes with a train of cosmic level code words, top secret code words, indicating that behind that threat is a network that has access to the most important secrets of a whole range of executive departments, presumably CIA, National Security Agency, Pentagon, FBI, Justice, Treasury even, the whole array. And that's a threat. The idea is, what they're saying to Bush is, you've got to go on television and start saying, Bin Laden, Bin Laden, Bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, 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 and you will remain in office. If you don't, you may be liquidated at any time. You may not see the end of this day. The invisible government had to have the possibility of nuclear escalation, and they did. They had it in two ways that we know of. One is that in the Angel is Next phone call, they had code words that seemed to indicate that they had access to the nuclear launch codes, that they were able to somehow access the so-called football, the collection of briefcases that are filled with these codes that accompany the president but are also kept in other places for use in case of all-out nuclear war. So the perpetrators of 9/11, the coup faction inside the U.S. government, have these codes. They can launch nuclear war that way.
Hey, Mr. Rove. WeAreChange Ohio. Get a quick word with you, sir? No. You don't even know me, sir. Just wanted a quick question, sir.
People are waking up to the crimes 9/11, sir.
We know you're involved in 9/11.